Good morning, y'all. A great celebration this morning, Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Before we get into that, let me just ask, and this isn't a trick question. There's no wrong answer, and both answers are going to be important. For whom this morning was it inconvenient to come to Mass at 9? Or even to find a time to come to Mass at all on like a random weekday? Couple of you? For most of you, no? Okay. So, if you didn't raise your hand, I want to see you here every morning at 9 a.m. Ain't no reason not to be, if it's not inconvenient, right? Let me ask the question again then. Maybe the answers will change a little bit. For whom was it a little inconvenient to come to a holy day of obligation in the middle of the week? Still not that many more. Okay, so this really does bear some truth. If you guys are able, man, come to daily masses. Daily masses are awesome. Now, this mass is going to feel like a Sunday mass because it's a huge celebration. But regular daily masses, depending on how long Father Tim and I choose to preach, are between like 20 minutes and 35 minutes long, right? So if you've never been to a daily mass, I mean, it's the best daily prayer life you can have, right? So if you have a daily prayer life, great. If you want to make it better, or if you don't have a daily prayer life and you're like, what's just an easy packet I can drop into my day, and I don't have to like learn how to build my own prayer life, this is it, daily mass, right? So for those of you who did find it difficult though, well done, good job. This is worth the inconvenience, right? Why? Because anytime the church tells us something is a holy day of obligation, what they're saying is that this particular thing we're celebrating is important enough for the whole Christian community to come together and to spend time thinking about what the thing is that we're celebrating, and then offering gratitude to God as a whole community for that thing. That's it. That's what a holy day of obligation is. It's so important, which means it's so good for us to be here, to meditate on what the thing is, and then to offer God, the Father, thanks for whatever that is. On every Sunday is a holy day of obligation. What do we celebrate every Sunday? The resurrection. Every Sunday is a little weekly Easter, right? Which I could also point out then every Friday is a little weekly Lent, right? So we keep Friday as a day of penance, but we celebrate every Sunday as a little Easter, a resurrection, and it's a holy day of obligation because that thing that we celebrate on Sunday is so important that the whole Christian community needs to get together to spend time meditating on that reality. Jesus is risen from the dead, y'all. You think about that, everything else comes into perspective. Right? We celebrate that every Sunday. It's so important. And then, of course, the second half of the Mass is offering thanks to God for the first half of the Mass, the time that we have to think about whatever it is we're talking about, right? And so we offer God thanks for the resurrection of His Son, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. What's today's celebration? The Immaculate Conception of Mary. Good. Not Jesus. A lot of times, I mean, the Immaculate Conception is such a glorious title. Sometimes we might feel a little worried that, am I actually applying that to Mary and not to Jesus? Of course, Jesus' conception is immaculate, but we don't need to celebrate Jesus' conception as immaculate. We celebrate it at Christmas, and it just goes without saying. Jesus is God. Of course, his conception was immaculate. But why was Jesus' conception immaculate? It was immaculate because Mary's was. Right? What we're celebrating today, why this is so important, is because without Mary, we would not have salvation. Mary is not the instrument of our salvation, Jesus is. But without Mary, we would not have Jesus. Now, to look at that more closely, we go back to the book of Genesis and the creation account and the fall of man. Did Adam sin on his own? No, it was that woman that he put here with me. She gave me the fruit. We fell as a whole species. We fell as man and woman. We fell as humanity. What seems more appropriate? That some man swoops in and saves all of humanity, or that man and woman together undo the thing that was broken that man and woman broke together? Mary is the new Eve, just as we talk about Jesus as the new Adam. Mary had a yes to God, just as Jesus had a yes to God, which undid the ancient curse of Adam's original disobedience, Adam's original no. In the garden, Adam said no to God, and Mary said no to God. There's some significant nuances to this, right? But painting with a broad brush, Adam and Eve said no to God. It was important then that both man and woman, both made in the image and likeness of God, had an opportunity to work together to restore what was fallen, what was broken. Mary's yes to God, we heard in the gospel. May it be done unto me, I am the handmaid of the Lord, may it be done unto me according to your word. Jesus' yes to the Father was in the garden when, sweating blood because of what he had to do to undo what Adam did, he said, Father, take this cup away from me, but not my will, but yours be done. In both of these scenes, we see the unraveling of the ancient curse that we call sin and the binding effect that it has on us. Mary, then, is an essential. That means without which it won't happen. Mary is an essential component to the mystery that God accomplishes in His Son, Jesus Christ, namely our salvation. This is why the Church calls Mary not only the Immaculate Conception, but the co-redemptrix. She, working as spouse to the Spirit, mother of God, son or daughter of the Father, working in tandem with the one that she was worthy to bear into this world, working with Him to save humanity. Mary, of course, is also the first image that we get of a redeemed human person, of what it looks like to be glorified. Let's see, we got a window over here, right there. These last two windows, right? Mary is already enjoying the complete accomplishment of what God sent His Son to do. I mean, even the great saints in history who have died, their bodies are laying somewhere under the ground, waiting for the final moment when Jesus comes again and calls forth both the living and the dead in the resurrection of the body. But where's Mary's body? Already in heaven. In the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which is that first window, that left window there, right? And receiving the reward of her unity with her Son, sharing in His great dignity as priest, prophet, and king, the right window, her coronation as Queen of heaven and earth. But there's one more appropriate image of Mary that we consider on this feast day in particular, the Immaculate Conception, and why Mary needed to be immaculately conceived. I mean, surely we have an infinite regress, right? If we say, well, Jesus had to have an immaculate mother for Jesus to have an immaculate birth. If that's the case, and that's only the case, well then, didn't Joachim and Anne need to have immaculate conceptions, for Mary to have an immaculate conception, for Jesus to have an immaculate conception? And then didn't the great-great-great-great-great-grandparents have to be immaculately conceived, right? We have this infinite regress. That's not the reason, okay? That's just a matter of effect. The reason Mary had to be immaculately conceived was because she and she alone was the ark of the new covenant. This is perhaps Mary's most glorious title And it's translated, not translated, but it's understood in a less literary way by simply calling her Theotokos, Mother of God, the bearer of God. She bore within herself God. Well, what was the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament? Right? It was a gold box, right? But it was more than that. It contained within it the objects of the covenant that God made with Israel. The box itself was not the covenant. It simply bore the objects of the covenant. But it was so important that that box be absolutely to specifications. God gave Moses incredibly specific instructions on how to make the Ark of the Covenant because it had to be perfect. It had to be immaculate in order to be a worthy vessel to carry the items of the covenant. In the book of Revelation, when we hear John writing about his mom, Mary, remember, at the foot of the cross, Jesus gave Mary to John and John to Mary. He lived with this lady for his whole life, his lady, right? The Madonna. No one knows Mary better. No one knows the mystery of Mary better than John. And in his book of Revelation, he writes, when he sees the tabernacle, when he sees the altar and the sanctuary of God, he says, in the center was the Ark of the Covenant. And then the Protestants put a chapter break in there. There is no chapter break in this. The thought continues immediately over from, I looked up to heaven and I saw the Ark of the Covenant, a woman clothed in the sun, crowned with the stars, and standing on the moon. She is the Ark of the Covenant, of the new and everlasting covenant, which means she bore within herself the object of the covenant itself. In the old ark, what was carried? There were three things. Manna, the staff, and the commandments. The tablets, exactly. The stone tablets, right? The dead staff, yeah? The manna, which ceased as soon as they got into the promised land. The useless manna, but nevertheless, the symbol of the covenant. These foreshadowed items carried in a foreshadowing ark, was made in its fullest realization, really real, in the unity between Mary and Jesus as mother and son, cooperative co-heirs to the mission of salvation and the glory to be had in heaven. Mary held within herself not some dead stone tablets, but the full living enfleshment of the law of God's word. She bore within herself the authority made present, Emmanuel, God with us, not some dead staff, but the true possessor of the authority which was only symbolized in the staff. The blossom, the bud of the house of Jesse, David's line reborn. And not some manna, which when eaten in the desert, one still dies, but the true bread come down from heaven, without eating which we have no life within us. But having eaten of the flesh of the Son of Man, body, blood, soul, and divinity, we have everlasting life. Mary is the Ark of the Covenant, and so it makes absolute sense that she be immaculately conceived. Now, does this mean, though, that Mary being born, conceived, not even born, John the Baptist was born without sin, but he was conceived in sin. Mary being conceived, which, by the way, if this is important, the moment of conception, we should apply that to other parts of our thought too, right? Life beginning at the moment of conception. Yeah, that's an important consideration that we have here today. That's just an aside. So just, apply that to your daily life, right? When Mary is immaculately conceived, does that mean then that she does not need the grace of Jesus for salvation? That she doesn't need Jesus to be saved? Is that what that means? No. Mary's immaculate conception was foreseen by the Father, and the prevenient grace of the cross is sent back, anticipated for her Immaculate Conception. This is what the collect says. As you preserved her from every stain by virtue of the death of your Son which you foresaw. No one is saying Mary is God. No one is saying Mary is unlike us and not in need of salvation. But in fact, we are saying she is the proof that we who need salvation can find it in Jesus' death, passion, death, and resurrection. And so God provides for his people by providing a worthy ark for his Son, the substance of the covenant, to be brought into the presence of humanity to heal it, to undo the curse. And so this unity between God and man, this unity between man and woman, was the most fundamental and original reality of all of existence in the beginning. It is the means by which God restores that creation. And that communion of God and man with woman, will persist into eternity. These most fundamental realities, most fundamental relationships, are the very things that are under attack today by the serpent who continues and persists at striking at the heel of the Christ in every single Christian baptized and made in the image and likeness of God and recreated in the person of Jesus Christ by virtue of that baptism. And we are made enemies of him, which means there must be no place in us for tolerance or concord or détente with these attacks against these most fundamental realities of God's goodness of creation. That he loves creation and wants a relationship with it, and that in that creation he fundamentally delineates between man and woman, that diversity in its unity might beget a fruitfulness. Adam and Eve sinned together. If that unity wasn't so fundamental, it wouldn't have necessitated a new Adam and a new Eve to unravel that problem. But just as we say in the marriage rite at Mass, in the nuptial blessing, that marriage, the unity between the diverse man and woman, is the one gift that was not lost by sin. We lost everything except for that, because that is the most important thing about our entire existence. That reality was respected by the Father in his plan to save us. It makes no wonder then that these realities, family, marriage, true diversity, true unity, complementarity, are under attack by the devil in the world today. If there is absolute and utter enmity put between the woman and the serpent, there must be absolute enmity in our heart against or for one or the other. It cannot be both. We are either Team Serpent or Team Jesus and Mary. That's it. We cannot be Catholics who compromise in one area of the faith or another for convenience, for political expediency, or even for harmony within our own family. We maintain the dignity that is ours, given to us by Jesus and Mary, or we do not. You see, that's the other thing about the she was perfect and pure, without spot or blemish. Our consciences are given the gift of the same through the sacraments. And we're expected by Jesus to live in that same immaculata, in that same immaculate way, that we make no room for evil. But we unite ourselves with Mary to Jesus, our head, so that we become one man in Christ Jesus, to the glory of the Father. And upon his ascension, we with Mary ascend with him to the right hand of the Father, that having been made perfect like Mary in Jesus, we might enjoy for all eternity the salvation that they won for us by their own respective acts in the history of salvation.